Matt, one of the things you said in that was, what does AI actually mean? Maybe we start with that because I recently had to debate someone, well, maybe not debate, but we had a disagreement with something I was doing in the IETF. He came back to me and said, AI is not a technical term, it's a marketing term. Back in the day, AI meant chess or video games. You always play against the AI, the NPC. Today, it means something else.
Hello and welcome to part one of this special two-part episode of the Cisco Learning Network podcast, exploring AI and enterprise networking. That was Joe Clarke, a distinguished engineer for Cisco that you heard, setting the stage for today's discussion on artificial intelligence and its growing role in the networking world. In this first half, Joe and Cisco Learning Network Community Manager Matt Saunders are joined by Principal Engineer Kareem Iskander and Distinguished Architect Hank Preston. These panelists have come together in this episode for a candid conversation about AI and networking. They start with the big picture, what AI really means in this context, how large language models are beginning to influence automation, and what this shift looks like from the perspective of practicing engineers. Throughout the discussion, you'll hear personal stories, real-world use cases, and practical ways AI is already making a difference in network operations. Whether you're just starting out or you've been working in networking for years, this part of the episode will give you a solid foundation for understanding the opportunities and challenges AI brings to our industry.
So first of all, thank you all very much for joining us on this episode. I know this is going to be incredibly valuable for the community, and we'll just kind of get right into it. I want to begin at kind of the high level of things. Obviously, we've been engaging with the community and talking to the community and listening to the community for quite some time now on this topic of AI. And hearing what their questions are, what their concerns are, kind of having just an open conversation. Kareem hosted a wonderful Ask Me Anything session on the community just a couple weeks back. We really took that, as well as some survey sessions and just engagement at Cisco Live, etc., to take away some lessons and some learnings about what's on the community's mind. So we'll start kind of high level. I think a good way to sum a lot of what we're hearing is that our community is very curious about how AI is reshaping network ops, what AI actually entails at the fundamental level. And in particular, there's a lot of questions about trust and autonomy. So Joe, I was thinking maybe we'll kind of start with you on this first question, and then Hank, Kareem, we'll just jump right in, get right into this topic. We'll keep it conversational, so jump in at any moment. But Joe, we'll start with network ops transformation. From your perspective, what are you seeing kind of currently, how AI is starting to transform network operations? And what do you kind of see coming down the road, coming down the pipeline in terms of how AI will impact network operations for folks?
Typically, it means large language models and these predictive, transformative text or image rendering systems. So it's important, I guess, we ground ourselves with what we mean by AI. And I think the industry, us, all your listeners, I think really have centered around the LLM approach, the large language model, or this notion that we have these maybe agents that are thinking to some degree for us, or that can write paragraphs, write code for us, or that can analyze large amounts of data and provide cogent sounding recommendations. So let's start with that. And then you asked about how that is impacting network ops. Between AI as chess and AI as a large language model who's writing code or talking to us like a pirate or analyzing these huge data sets, we had more of a predictive type of AI, and something that Cisco has been using for a long time. If you look at our products like DNA Center or APIC EM back in the day, which have now evolved into Catalyst Center, you've seen that we've been doing things where we realize that we have substantial amounts of data from telemetry, from syslog, even way back syslog, IPFix, NetFlow data, and we've been putting these classifiers, linear regression models, all of what was traditionally considered AI or machine learning, to try and find anomalies in that data, patterns, things that could predict potentially a hardware failure or a network outage, or just show us where we have bad user experience. So it's not like all of a sudden this LLM thing has caused us to say, well, AI is new, we must embrace it. We've been gradually embracing AI more and more in the network operations space. But what we're seeing in this more transformative LLM space is this idea of agents, an agents that can do things not necessarily to the point where we consider true agency. They're thinking machines that act truly on our behalf, but they help us. They help us realize automation to an extent where we can have it analyze output from various applications in our network, like ICE, like our source of truth data, DNS, DHCP data, our event database, like through Splunk, and start to provide us insights with what it's seeing and connect them in a way that it can create tickets for us with real problem descriptions, actionable things to do. It can take some of the minutia out of our flow and we can pass it work. We could say, okay, great. You saw this X, Y, and Z. What else should we be looking at? What else could this be? Kind of get like a differential diagnosis on network issues. And you saw a little bit of that if you watched the Cisco Live keynote from San Diego, where DJ was up there showing AI Canvas and what it was doing, what we're powering with this deep network model that we were talking about. You're starting to see some of that come to fruition. And you're starting to see people wanting to not only embrace what's off the shelf, but see how they can incorporate some of that technology into their own jobs with things like this notion of model context protocol and connecting large language models to the traditional network operations or network management systems that they have.
When you hear Joe mention Model Context Protocol, or MCP, he's talking about a framework that makes it easier for large language models to safely and consistently connect to external tools and systems. Think of it like a translator and a guardrail layer. MCP defines how the model can request information, what data it's allowed to access, and how those results get passed back. For network engineers, that means that you don't just throw raw configs or log files at a model and hope it understands. Instead, MCP provides structure and governance, so a large language model can interact with network automation tools, monitoring systems, or configuration managers in a predictable, secure way. It's early days, but the idea is to make AI assistants more reliable team members by giving them standardized, controlled access to the systems you already use.
So it's just, in my opinion, it's a cool way, a very nice way of connecting the network automation that we may have been doing or may not have been doing with things that feel a little bit more human, a little bit more at the operator level in the front end.
I think we can wrap on that.
Yeah, I think this is the episode. We're done. All right, talk to you guys later.
That was pretty brilliant. Yeah.
Really good.
Hank, Kareem, thoughts, perspectives?
Yeah, I can jump in real quick. I think for me, Joe has covered everything where I think transformation is happening in our field. I think there's an aspect to having AI as your assistant while you're automating your network. And I think that's really where it's very useful. A lot of network engineers are not coders by design, right? And that's okay. And so while we're working on automation and programmability, having that AI next to you with your core skills, obviously, of what we've been talking to you about from a DevNet perspective, from programmability, from Python skills. I'm not saying we get into vibe coding here. This is not what I want.
When Kareem says vibe coding, he's talking about a style of relying almost entirely on an AI model to generate code from vague or incomplete prompts, rather than learning the fundamentals yourself. The idea is that instead of deliberately writing and understanding code, you're just quote-unquote vibing with the AI, letting it take guesses and fill in the blanks. While this can feel fast and creative, it's risky because you don't always know if the output is accurate or secure. That's why Kareem emphasizes balance, using AI as an assistant to help with scripts, debug errors, or speed up repetitive tasks, but not as a replacement for building your own core skills in automation and programmability.
But the idea is having that assistant next to you to be able to, help you with your Ansible playbook or help you write that Terraform script plan, I should say. Or maybe yours just Python where you can pull up Cursor or LM Studio and ask the model to help you with the script, help you debug. I've recently worked on a project where I was taking the Open API config into MCP, and I wanted to show how easy it is to create an MCP server from your APIs with some restriction around it and governance. What I ran into, and this is a good example here, I ran into the piece where for this demo, and quote demo, The script would fail because my Open API config had null values. And as part of the MCP server that was running, it would validate the schema and the schema would fail. And hence my code would fail. And so I really didn't know how to fix this. This is very, very deep into coding. I wanted to remove the ability to validate the schema. So one of the options were to go through the 852 endpoints and put validation equal false in them. Or I could have just asked the model to find a way to bypass this and overwrite this function, which it helped me with. And I'm not that deep and I don't have that much depth into Python to know how to do this, but it helped me and it did it. And so having that next to you from an automation perspective, having the AI next to you is very helpful. And that's helping you transform as you work on projects, automation projects.
Hank, what are you seeing from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, AI is an interesting tool that's in place, and we've got a lot of capabilities that it's offering us. Both Joe and Kareem have kind of dove into a lot of the areas that are there. I guess the only thing I'll add at this point for this specific question is that we should all look at AI as just another way for us to get access to information and process information that's there. It may make it seem simple, and it's certainly more than just this, but if you just look at AI as kind of the next generation of how you Google something or how you look it up or how you search up some information, the question always will come through is, well, AI is not always right. Absolutely correct. But as I'm sure we've all seen, right, Reddit is not always correct. Stack Overflow is not always correct. Even Cisco documentation is not always correct that's there. I don't want to downplay kind of the risk for hallucinations, because there's a lot of folks, and myself included, right, that I'll ask a question of an AI, I'll see an answer and be like, yeah, that sounds good, and just move forward. But used properly, as Kareem pointed out, it really can speed up the work along from an operations perspective to kind of get to the bottom of it. I know you've got some other stuff you want to go into, so I don't want to monologue for too long on this, but there are a lot of ways that network engineers today can use AI as just part of their daily operations without diving into some of the depth and the complexity that you get with like true agentic systems. And I think Joe made a couple of points that I thought were really good, that there's the description and the definition and the vision of what agentic AI might offer us in the future. And then there's kind of what we can get out of it today, and just kind of understanding kind of the difference between today and the vision, and being excited about what we can achieve today and looking forward to potentially what the vision might give us in the future.
You touched a bit on trust for the agents, basically trust to enable the AI agents to automate network operations, updates, rollback changes, whatever it might be. Before we get into that, I do want to take a step back to where Joe started as well, what's included, and the topic of APIs. And how is this just a further evolution of API and Python-based network automation? And or maybe it's not just that, but is that still kind of some of the core foundational knowledge areas that folks should be understanding?
I guess I'll start with this one this time. There's a lot that goes into this. Like there's a ton of stuff that people wonder, and I've actually been pretty vocal when I've talked with other folks, even inside of our own team here at Learn with Cisco, on what does AI mean. I've been in network automation for, a decade or more at this point, along with Kareem, and Joe's been there just as well. Many of us have been defaulting to AI as like the next generation of automation. We need to make sure our API skills are great, Python skills are great. Absolutely true. I don't want to discount that those are valuable. But there's still a whole bunch of network engineers that it's not that they don't think that automation is important, but they don't want to define their job by their ability to write scripts or play with APIs. And so I think we need to make sure that those engineers also recognize that AI is for them too, right? There are things that typical traditional engineering-focused network engineer, as opposed to like an automation-focused network engineer, can still get out of AI as a user of AI, as kind of providing input as to what future agentic AI architectures might look like. To be effective in the future of how AI is going to kind of become part of your network operations team, right? There's this mindset that, okay, the AI assistants of the future, the network AI assistants of the future are like an extension of your team. For them to do that effectively, those agents need to be able to connect into your network, be able to read from your source of truth, gain access to your help desk ticket system. All of that to work effectively requires APIs and programmability. So that's at the heart of kind of adding this in. And in that way, it is an extension of what we've seen with network automation. But that doesn't mean to be a user of AI, you need to be super confident with APIs, that after going and being worried that you were going to be irrelevant if you didn't want to spend your whole day working with Python, AI comes around and like all of a sudden now, oh no, they're telling me I got to learn Python. No, it's a valuable skill. I think it's worthwhile for every engineer to at least know the fundamentals, what's possible, maybe be able to execute a Python script or evaluate an API as part of kind of product evaluations and architecture design. But you don't have to memorize and become automation engineers just because AI is here, right? There's a ton of power you can get even today just using AI as a user and taking advantage of things that are starting to show up off the shelf. So
yeah, no, thank you for that, Hank. I was very interested to hear your perspective on that exact topic. So you mentioned, all the other topics that we'll cover. So I'll move on to kind of back over to that trust on the AI agents. And a very specific question came up in our community Ask Me Anything discussion.
And just a quick note here, the discussion thread that Matt mentioned can be found linked in the description of this episode, so you can check it out for yourself. That thread came out of an Ask Me Anything session that Kareem hosted with the community. In that open discussion, he answered questions like how AI is transforming network operations and automation in large enterprises, what security benefits and challenges AI is introducing to enterprise networks, and where AI might play the most impactful role in the future of enterprise networking infrastructure. If you want to dive deeper into those conversations, be sure to follow the link in the episode notes.
And Kareem, you addressed this question on that discussion thread, but if you want to expand on it at all, otherwise, Joe, I'd also love to hear your perspective on this. And, the specific question is, what defines an AI agent that is good enough so you would let it do network changes alone, unsupervised?
I'd love to hear Joe's feedback on this or opinion on this, but I still believe that there isn't one. I'm not sure I'm comfortable with having an AI agent that just does it.
Ooh.
So the answer is does not exist.
Tell us about your knockbot, Joe, because I think you were allowing your knockbot in Amsterdam to do a few things, right?
I guess it comes down to the old joke, like, what do you mean by is? Define what you mean by agent. I was reading this article the other day, very cerebral piece on AI and what it really is. And if you think about what an agent is, like a travel agent or one of these, we throw around the word agent, maybe it's someone acting on your behalf, someone that you delegate work to and they act on your behalf. And do we have that with AI today? I don't think it's there. And I think many people would agree with me. Some people may not. That's fine. I was trying to describe this to my boss's boss the other day. She was asking, like, what does it look like with your job of the future? And I say, well, you ask Kareem, Hank, or I to do something for you. You delegate that task to us. And then we go off and we come back and say, what do you think of this? And you say, nah, don't want. You don't tell us exactly what we need to do with it. You tell us roughly that this needs to be better or that needs to be different. And we're expected to know enough via previous interactions with you, via our experience, and all of that context. We're expected to know what to do next. And this is why I don't think we're at agency yet, because I have not yet found a chat agent, whatever, that is LLM based, that I can have that type of conversation to, that kind of very high level, this is what I want you to do, and give it that kind of very high level feedback and iterate until I achieve something that is truly wonderful or high value. It depends on the task, maybe. It depends on the complexity of the task. I always find myself having to change the way I speak and maybe give it a little bit more coaching than I would to a person. So defining agent. If you define an agent as just some piece of AI code that can go and do something, then to Hank's point, I built this AI knockbot agent for Cisco Live Europe last year. MCP didn't exist at the time, so it was a React agent. So it did some reasoning, determined what tools it had access to, took some action, and then provided some results. The tools that it had access to were Python functions that called into ICE, that called into Cisco Prime Network Registrar, Catalyst Center, Netbox, and you could ask it questions like, who has this MAC address? Or what is this IP address? Or reserve this DHCP lease. And within the boundaries of the functions that I wrote, most of them are read only. The what is this IP or that MAC address, read only functions. It would give you back the data that it had, and it would present it either in a nice human friendly way or fun ways like pirate speak or poems or things like that. But it would do that. Now, the read write change, like reserve this lease in DHCP or delete this reservation, the reserve, I said anyone can do, anyone on our team, and they were the only ones allowed access into this WebEx space. Anyone on our team could do that. To delete, I wrote into Python code specific user IDs that were allowed to delete. I didn't give full open access to all our tools because I kid you not, very smart, very experienced network engineers, the first time I said, guess what? I've got this thing, have at it, play with it. The first thing they tried was delete all your configuration and restart the network. Like just trying to like break the network they had built. And that's users doing fun, stupid things. But imagine if it's just an accidental query by a user. And if you give too much trust, if you're not thinking about the security there, you could not maliciously, but accidentally cause a lot of problems. And this is where this now, the MCP is the hotness right now, Model Context Protocol. This is one thing that it needs work in, is if we are truly going to make these tools that enable agency, if we're truly going to make them act on our behalf, how do we pass our credentials, what we are authorized to, how do we let it act on our behalf in a trustworthy way? And that is yet to be defined and standardized in the industry. That's a challenge right now.
And it's not there. I don't think it's there yet.
What's interesting on this side is that everybody, when they talk about the future of agentic AI, and the vision is like, okay, we're going to show up and we're going to like go buy like agentic network AI expert agent that can do everything for me, like 101. Like that's the first thing we're going to get into. And that's silly, right? Because we don't hire anybody that's given. Even if you hire a human expert network engineer, odds are pretty good. Like the first day you don't give them like expect them to go out and do everything. Like there's an onboarding procedure. There's a level of building trust and confidence that anybody and any tool you have can go through on that. So I think that's what it'll come down to with the agentic AI and when are they good enough, is that you will roll out certain tasks that you feel comfortable that it can do effectively and consistently and do it well. And then as it proves on those, you'll move up that list and give it some new things that are there. There are technical things, as Joe mentioned and Kareem mentioned, like the MCP, the RBAC stuff, the role-based access control to make sure that things are handled effectively. And it feels like AI has been around for ages at this point. But man, as Joe mentioned, it was like last year at Cisco Live Europe, like MCP wasn't even a thing yet. And now it is. And so we are so early in this view of what agentic AI and AI operations is going to do in the future that we're going to see tons of adjustments and best practices learned out. I think all of us have been kind of experimenting with different MCP servers, both ones that are available off the shelf, building some of our own, kind of giving each other feedback. And one of the things that I've noticed is that it's so early that there's no kind of agreed upon best practice to how you architect and build an MCP tool, right? There's no agreed upon how you handle, like how smart should the tool be and how much should you rely on the LLM to be able to do things and provide capabilities. And that's what I'm interested in seeing over the next couple of years is kind of, I don't know if MCP is going to be the standard that sticks around, right? This could be a point in time for some future standard that does all these things better, but whatever it is, right, we will eventually get really good at how to build the appropriate tools so that our agentic AI agents and assistants and team members have trustworthy, effective access into all of the systems necessary to act on our behalf. Joe's example made me laugh a little bit because I can reflect back on that side, because that delegation, right? It's just the future of delegation is going to be allowing AI agents to do things for us, where we delegate to people now, right? If we have a junior engineer on the team that I'm working with, right, I'm going to give them some information, and depending on how my experience with them has been and what their level of skill set is deemed to be will determine how detailed my instructions are. Sometimes it may be very, very detailed. Do this and then this, and here's where you're going to go. And it's hand-holdy because they're new. Other engineers that are far more experienced, I can have like fire off a quick message in WebEx, and boom, I know that they're going to get it right and get it done. We're going to see the same thing with these tools. Each one of them will eventually evolve and get better as they become a part of our team. And I imagine at some point they won't even be called AI anymore, as Joe was mentioning with chess. It's like, that's anything that's new is considered AI. Eventually it'll just become part of what we have. So
I want to touch on something Hank said about all these MCP servers and go back to what he said about network automation. Because he said, is everyone going to have to learn Python? Maybe not, but maybe because of things like MCP, people are going to start operationalizing more network automation. That the glue that enables them is the LLM. And as Hank was just talking about, as the industry, and there are opportunities, I understand, to standardize some of this, as the industry starts to converge around this and we get best practices and we get the balance between what the tool handles, what the LLM handles, I think you're going to see companies that maybe shied away or were a little nervous about some of the network automation, they start to realize that because the interface to it is a lot more human centric than what they've been used to with things like Ansible or Terraform, they're going to get more opportunity to self-serve in a way that's very comfortable for them. And the tooling behind that, because the industries come together, will hopefully be a little bit more trustworthy. And with this marketplace of MCP servers, hopefully easy to find what you need to bolt into your network to deliver the outcomes you want.
And so then as we work through those trust questions and challenges and kind of evolve the trust and build the trust and improve the models and the agents and to establish that trust and earn our trust, we are seeing from community members today that either they're actively exploring for opportunities to leverage AI to improve their task efficiencies, or they're being directed as well by their leadership to find ways to use AI to improve their task efficiency. So there's a lot of questions there too. What can I do today as a network ops engineer, as a network engineer, to leverage AI to improve my efficiencies on the job and to maybe eliminate or reduce some redundant, repetitive tasks or streamline some of that work? From your perspectives today, and maybe Hank, we'll start with you. What kind of use cases are you seeing right now that folks can start to leverage?
Yeah. So the first thing I'll say is unless you are in a very forward-facing, mature enterprise and organization, odds are good you don't have access to like anything remotely close to a true agentic AI type of an operations that I would think would fit for production, because there's questions around intellectual property, security, all the responsible AI stuff that's there. And so while I encourage everybody to experiment and understand what the future of agentic AI will be, the fact of the matter is today, most engineers should probably be sticking with some fairly straightforward and simple things that are in place as far as the use cases go. A common starting point for folks is use your AI tools, whatever's approved for you and your organization, and ask questions of it that you might have typically run over to Google for, and then like check the sources to start building that confidence, understanding what it's capable of, what it's not capable of. Assuming you have access to an AI tool that you're allowed to send and provide what might be considered internal confidential data, great use cases I like for it is not necessarily using it to generate network configurations, but man, one of my favorite use cases is to review configurations I've built and say, hey, could you take a look at this configuration template and give me some feedback based on things I may have left off or some mistakes you might see. So use it as like a peer reviewer is an excellent use case, because that'll help you see what it's good at. You'll probably quite likely find some things that it points out that you didn't think about and be like, oh, that's really interesting as it goes forward. Because that's back to the whole read-only thing, is it's providing you feedback on something that you've done on that side. And it's a great entry point to go into it, with the caveat that, and I hate having to keep caveating these, but the last thing I want to see is see someone listen to our podcast here and then go grab some configuration or some log output and then go dump it into like chatgpt.com, because the data there is rough. But if you've got access to something that you can, and I'm going to give a suggestion on that in just a moment, another thing that's really useful that I've been time and time again very surprised by how well many of these LLMs can take log data or debug data from a network output and analyze that data for me. I mean, I've set up use cases because you have to test them in the lab, right? Break something in the network, generate some debug messages, put that in an LLM and say, what's wrong? And, 9 times out of 10, it gives me a good pointer of a place to go after by looking through those, because there's so much training data that was used from debugs and log messages and support forums, and documentation is really fantastic. So I'm sure Joe and Kareem want to jump in here as well, but I will pitch for this. If you want to start experimenting with these, one of the recommendations I give for a lot of folks is do things locally. There's so much potential damage can be done so quickly by using a public service like Gemini or ChatGPT or Claude or Mistral. They're great tools, But anything you send into them is completely out of your bounds. You don't know what it's going to do unless your organization has some really tight agreements with those companies. But you can download a tool like LM Studio.
When Hank refers to LM Studio, he's talking about a lightweight application that lets you run large language models directly on your own computer. Unlike cloud-based AI tools that send data to external servers, LM Studio keeps everything local, meaning your prompts, responses, and any sensitive information on your own machine. For network engineers, that makes it especially useful for testing, debugging, or experimenting with AI safely, without the risks that come with exposing configs or logs to public services.
Kareem mentioned it a little bit ago. It's a free-to-use tool for both personal and work, where you can download it onto most modern workstations or laptops these days and run local LLMs directly on your laptop, 100% local. Your queries, your data, your responses only stay on your laptop. And so now I take away a lot of the concerns. I'll say a lot because I don't think anything's 100% safe, but enough of the concerns where I'm okay running a model directly on my laptop and then sending it my debug messages, giving it my network configuration pieces, because now it's just on my laptop and all of that data is right there. And now I can also experiment with how well does OpenAI's GPT OSS, the new model they just released, open model they released, how well does that behave compared to something like maybe Gemma that's built by Google on top of what their open source version of like Gemini, or maybe you look at Phi from Microsoft or Granite from IBM. Like you can start to see and compare and understand what you get from different types of models that are there. The first time I did it, my expectations were really low because you hear about like these giant nuclear powered data centers that OpenAI and Microsoft and Facebook are running for their big models. And you see all the amazing behavior that comes there. And I'm like, how could something just running on my MacBook give me something even remotely as good? It's certainly not the same thing, but man, it is surprising how well these LLMs that can run on most just laptops these days can behave in a lot of these same use cases. So experiment that way, like get started locally, because it takes away a lot of the worry about, oh my God, I just pasted my debug or my log output and it had like our public IPs or our network schemes that are in there. It had log messages and things that really shouldn't have gone public. I mean, it's so easy to do that with some of the public tools. So try local, like that'd be a recommendation I would give. And then I'll stop monologuing and let the other gents chime in.
Hank has covered pretty much everything that I wanted to say as far as a use case. On the try local, I think we should get a t-shirt that says try local. But on that, we've always talked about creating sandboxes from our automation days. He said, get a sandbox and test out your code. It's no different than that. Build a sandbox locally and test out AI. On top of the use cases to kind of make yourself more efficient at work is documentation for me. And I think Hank touched on that. One of the things that I've always struggled with is, yeah, I can work on a project. I can finish it. I can lose myself in code. I can, spend 7 hours like trying to figure out and debug issues. But somehow, somewhere, I always had this like mental block when it came to documentation. Where do I start? How do I explain it properly? What's the right format? And so the models that are out there today are really, really good at that. And so could you leverage some of you do the heavy lifting, whether you're working on an automation project or maybe configuring a network, you work on that and then let the model document the rest for you, while it's the agent even that's running locally could be watching what you're doing, and from there it learns what's happening and it could spit out a document for you to share with your team. So that's something that has made me more efficient. The other thing is also that you could potentially think about, as long as you're practicing safe AI, could you leverage AI to basically cross-examine issues? So you have an issue here, you have a log server there, maybe you have syslog sitting on your system itself. Could you feed all that data in and let the agent figure out for you what went wrong and potentially suggest fixes that you can go back and do, as opposed to you having to log into multiple systems and look at dashboard here, dashboard there. I think this is the idea of AI Canvas that Cisco is working on and is releasing, to be able to bring all these data sources in, but you could start doing that today on your own. So those are kind of the use cases I would say for a network engineer and somebody in operation can start getting into.
Sounds like it comes back to the read access. We're okay, we're comfortable with local controlled read access for the most part. And we still might have some room to go with write access and deploying configs. Does that sound fair and reasonable to say, or?
Treat it like gambling, right? When you dive into some of the write access, right? Don't ask it to do something if you're not completely okay with losing it. And that's a way to experiment and play around, right?
And that brings us to the close of part 1 of our conversation on AI and networking. In this first half, we explored definitions, early applications, and how network engineers can begin thinking about AI as a companion technology that enhances rather than replaces their core skills. But we're just getting started. In part 2, our guests will go deeper into trust, governance, and responsible adoption of AI in enterprise environments, as well as the skills you'll want to focus on, whether you're at the entry, professional, or expert level of your career. Be sure to join us for part 2, and while you're here, don't forget to subscribe to the Cisco Learning Network podcast wherever you listen. And for even more resources, discussions, and community support, head to the Cisco Learning Network at learningnetwork.cisco.com and become a member today. Thanks for listening.